Hello, and welcome back to the AusCannaPodcast, where we explore the people, ideas, and conversations shaping Australia's medicinal cannabis community. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today's guest is Daniel Robinson Croft, founder of Let's Budvocate, an educational platform focused on conscious cannabis consumption, harm reduction, and helping people develop a healthier and more intentional relationship with cannabis. Cannabis conversations often focus on access, products, cultivars, and legislation. But one area that doesn't always receive the same amount of attention is how we actually consume cannabis and the relationship we build with it over time. How do we know when our consumption is serving us well? How do we recognize when habits have become automatic? What role do tolerance breaks play? And how do we navigate the stigma that still surrounds cannabis while maintaining honesty about both its benefits and its challenges? Daniel has spent a considerable time exploring these questions through education, personal experience, and community engagement. His work encourages people to move beyond simply asking whether cannabis is good or bad, and instead focuses on using it intentionally and responsibly. Before we dive into all of that, it's time to get to know Daniel a little better with some rapid fire questions. Okay, let's get ready. Rapid fire. Here we go.
Okay.
Beach or mountains?
Mountains.
What's one book you've recommended more than any other?
Chasing the Scream by Johann Hari.
I've never heard of that. What is it about?
It is about the history of the war on drugs. It's an amazing book.
First cannabis experience, memorable or forgettable?
Kind of in the middle. It was memorable. It was my first experience, but I didn't actually really get high. So it's just not really that memorable. Yeah. It was actually before school when I was about 14 years old. Thought it was a great idea. And yeah, I didn't get stoned, but I was anxious that I was stoned and that everyone would think I was stoned, even though I wasn't. I was fine. But it didn't feel like there wasn't that classic effects that everybody talks about. And it wasn't until I think the second time that I consumed cannabis that I was just giggling nonstop and felt like I was floating in space.
It is. It's the giggles that get you. Good times, though.
Oh, yeah.
What's a failure you're grateful for now?
That's a good question. I guess before I started doing what I'm doing now, I started my own podcast. It was years ago. There was only one season, a few episodes talking with people around decriminalization of kind of drugs and substances more broadly, and delving into topics like the differences between decriminalization and legalization. And that was something I was very passionate about at the time and still am. But I guess it didn't really go, I guess, to plan. I guess it was just a really big learning experience. There are a lot of things through that I learned, and even though that project didn't necessarily go anywhere, I still gained a lot of valuable skills, insights, and experiences that help me with what I do nowadays.
No, I love it. I love it. It was a learning experience.
Definitely. I'm not really the biggest fan of the word failure because I believe that anything that's like a failure is a learning experience that you can grow from.
Oh, absolutely. It's only a failure if you don't learn something from it.
Exactly.
What's something everyone struggles with but rarely talks about?
internalized stigma. Everyone has internalized stigma and biases that they have towards different things, whether that's substances or different actions and behaviors that other people have, for whatever reason that is. And I think people don't really notice this. And I say this because I've been victim to this myself. You know, even though I consume cannabis, there have been times where I judged myself or I judged other people for their consumption behaviors and patterns. And yeah, I think a lot of people have internalized biases and stigmas towards different things that they may not realize they even have, whether that is because of how they were grown up and what environment they were in and what influences they had in life, or just general propaganda from the media and how we're conditioned to think about things like cannabis and substances and mental health.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. The media absolutely plays a huge part in a lot of that, for sure. What's something you've become more comfortable admitting?
That I consume cannabis.
Fuck yeah, buddy. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I love cannabis. It's something that's helped me for many years, and for a lot of times I had that internalized stigma with myself for consuming cannabis because I guess of the way that other people viewed it and didn't view it as a legitimate medicine. But yeah, I am happy to admit that I consume cannabis. I love walking around wearing cannabis t-shirts, and I just love it nowadays.
I love it. All right. So I've got a listener submitted question, and it's actually a two-part question. It's
Okay.
coming from Sam and his roommate Anthony in Victoria Harbour, South Australia. So are you
Beautiful.
ready?
Yeah.
Part one. What's one cannabis habit you wish more people adopted?
Oh, that's a good question. I wish more people adopted consuming cannabis more intentionally. And when I say intentionally, I mean just like thinking why you're consuming cannabis in that moment. Um, I think a lot of the time we can sometimes fall into automatic patterns and just kind of pick up the jozzer because why not? Because it's there. That's what feels natural. But I think sometimes it's important to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, why am I going to smoke this joint right now?
That's a good one. Mine's journaling. I wish more people would journal. I wish more people would write stuff down.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very important one as well. I think, especially once have kind of created your intention, and that it can also help you deepen your intention, why you're consuming, and you can understand those patterns behind why you're consuming.
Yep. Yep. So, second part of the question is, what's one cannabis habit you wish more people questioned?
That's another good question.
I love my listeners, man. They're on it when they submit questions. They
Oh, they're
really
great.
are.
So good.
I'll cop out and say that mine is I wish they would question THC levels more. Do
Yep.
I really need this 30%? Do I really need this whatever? Can I get away with minimal THC? Can I get away with it? Not at all.
Yeah, exactly. Like CBD, CBG, CBN, they're all amazing cannabinoids in themselves. But even with THC, like I've had 22% that have been stronger than 28%. So the math isn't really mathing for me.
I'm with you. That's why I'm like, I know it's a little bit of a cop out, but mine's definitely, I wish more people question THC.
Yeah. I think for me, it's like exhaling sooner. Because I notice a lot of people hold their smoke in or their vapor in thinking that it gets them more high. I personally think that that's just oxygen deprivation. Um,
No, I'm with you. I literally, okay, so I'll try to find it and throw it in the show notes, but I literally just read a study somewhere where I think it's like you hold your hit for 1 second, and I think you get something like 50%. And then if you hold it for 3 seconds, you get something like 90%. But like anything over 3 seconds is like what you're saying. It's like a waste of time. It's just, why are you even doing it kind of thing? And it is oxygen deprivation. And I laugh hysterically because I can't believe I'm going to share this because we're talking about, our younger teenage self getting high. Back in the day, we used to buy nickel and dime bags from this woman who would get her stuff from dirty cops.
yeah,
Fun times.
yeah.
And the only, you're buying questionable brick weed and shitty Mexican
Mhm.
dirt is all kind of sus to begin with. And
Yeah.
so 14, 15-year-old me was like, okay, I got to come up with a standard on how to know if it's any good. So you're ready?
Yep.
It's my standard. I can't believe I'm admitting this, but whatever. 5 hits held for 5 seconds each. And if I wasn't high 10 minutes later, it was shitty weed, man.
Uh,
There you go.
honestly, that I would have done the same thing as a teenager. But like I mean, back then I didn't have that education. I,
I didn't
there's
either.
none of
I'm
that.
fucking like in the 90s, like what the hell am I doing at 14, 15? First of all, why am I buying my weed from, someone who's getting it from dirty cops? That's a whole nother story. But like it looks, man, when you Google Mexican dirt or brick weed, those pictures just don't really bring it home. Like
No.
it smelled like dirt and it tasted like shit. And how did you know it was going to be any, like, how did you know? You had to have some sort of bar. And like I said, it was called the 5x5 test.
5x5
My
test. That's great.
friends used to make fun of me.
Oh,
Okay.
that's great.
Woo. Good times. Good
Yeah.
times. Thank you, Daniel, for playing
Thank you.
rapid fire questions with me. I love that segment so much because you always get a little insight of the person behind the work.
Yeah.
um,
Great questions.
yeah, man. Like I said, I love my listeners. They're on it when they submit questions. They really are. Um, Speaking of your work, one of the things I've definitely learned from doing these conversations is that nobody wakes up one day and says to themselves, I'm going to be an advocate. They just don't. There's always a reason behind it, there's always a story. And so I'm super excited to hear about yours. So let's start at the beginning, Daniel. What started you on the journey with cannabis, and why did you decide to start something so amazingly named Let's Budvocate? Because that's an amazing name.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, where to start? So I guess like through my adolescence and young years and teenage years, I struggled with like a bit of mental health issues. Um, and as we talked about before, I consumed cannabis when I was 14, and between 14 and 15, I only really consumed cannabis less than 5 times. And then it wasn't until I was 16 years old and my mental health started kind of getting worse. And I then kind of found cannabis again, and it just kind of alleviated a lot of the symptoms that I was having and made life a bit more bearable. But I guess at that time, and especially as a 16-year-old, cannabis was not seen as a legitimate medication to be taken. So I then went on a journey taking different pharmaceutical medications, each with their own negative side effects. And as I started, I guess, getting better and I started studying mental health and then began working in the field, I became really passionate about advocating for law reform and harm reduction. And it was actually that book I mentioned earlier, Chasing the Scream, that really opened my eyes to like what is actually going on with the war on drugs, how it all started, and like why it's even a thing. And that just opened a deep rabbit hole of learning as much as I possibly could about the history of the war on drugs. I then was working as a youth peer advocate at a youth drug and alcohol service for about 4 years. And during that time, I really delved deep into advocacy and harm reduction. Um, and something I noticed through using services as a young person, as well as working in the sector and, reading lots of different resources, I realized that there wasn't really anything specific. Like there were resources for cannabis, but a lot of those resources were not made by cannabis consumers. And then when it came to harm reduction resources, there would be cannabis harm reduction resources, but most of them were kind of, it would be like one document or one sheet that just has lots of different tips. So I wanted to make something that would have helped me when I was a young person. And I just started by making cannabis harm reduction resources that were categorized by consumption method. So instead of it just being, this is cannabis and here's a whole lot of tips about it, it was, this is cannabis. Did you consume from a bong? If so, here's tips specific for bongs and, whatever other consumption method that someone may use.
I like that though. That's you seeing a gap in education from your personal experience and saying, I can fill that gap. What does Budvocate mean to you personally? Because again, like I said in the little intro there, I love the name. Where did it come from?
So originally in the early days, Let's Budvocate was originally meant to be an advocacy platform. So it was going to be a space to just like advocate for cannabis law reform, and I guess community and things related to that. But as time went on, I realized that my passion and skills really leaned into the education side of things. So originally, Let's Budvocate was like advocate, meaning like advocating for law reform. But now, what Let's Budvocate means to me is we all advocate for ourselves in our day-to-day life, and we all advocate for ourselves within our care. And, especially with something like cannabis, where a lot of, there's still those stigmas out there, and even in, I guess, progressive spaces, there's still sometimes internalized stigma when it comes to care.
Where do you think those cannabis stigmas originate?
I think stigma around cannabis comes from like years and years and years of prohibition and years of propaganda that was put out to make people think about cannabis in this way.
No, I agree. Absolutely. What forms of stigma do you think still exist today?
Well, there's definitely still the broad stigma of people who consume cannabis. There's definitely still a big thing around stereotypes and that stoners are lazy and people that smoke cannabis don't do anything and sit on the couch and just eat food all day and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas it's like most people that consume cannabis are day-to-day people that, you know, so I guess there's that. And then there's also those kind of internalized stigmas that we were talking about before. And I guess examples of that would be kind of similar to those, I guess, stereotypes, but it can be a lot more internalized, and we may not even realize that we're doing it if we're not, I guess, aware of it.
What role do you think education plays in reducing stigma?
Education definitely plays an important role in reducing stigma. I think if people actually know what cannabis is, and especially from a lot of the scientific research that's finally being allowed to be done, um, I guess the more people know about what cannabis is, what its effects are, and especially other cannabinoids other than THC, is really important because, things like CBD or CBG, they don't have those psychoactive effects that THC have. So they can be extremely beneficial for a lot of people that may only be resistant to it because of those stigmas that they have.
I totally agree. Um, you touched on it a little bit earlier, harm reduction. I know that that is something that you're super passionate about. I think that harm reduction is one of those things that it's like a common term, like in health discussions, but I'm not really sure it's really understood within cannabis circles. So when we talk about harm reduction in the context of cannabis, what does that mean?
So I think harm reduction in the context of cannabis is, I guess, a unique one because harm reduction more broadly as a sense can be tied to, many things like pill testing services or medically supervised consumption spaces. But specifically to cannabis, cannabis is a really unique plant and it's got many medicinal values. So it helps a lot of people. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not generally that harmful. But there's definitely ways that it can cause harms. Like one thing that we were talking about before around, holding in the smoke, if you were to apply harm reduction to that, it would, be like, don't hold in your smoke any longer than 3 seconds. So I guess like harm reduction is just basically reducing the harms of something. So it could be another thing like making sure you clean your bong frequently, or your vaporizer.
Yeah, man. Cleaning your devices. I think that's something that I'm guilty of. I mean, I'd like to say that I'm proactive in my cleaning, but I'm sure I could do it more.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's and I guess a lot of this comes from, years of myself not consuming in the healthiest ways. Like I was a morning to bedtime bong smoker that didn't clean my bong regularly. And yeah, I learned one or two things from that.
Yeah, I bet. Um, Here's a question for you. How can experienced consumers model responsible behavior?
That is a really good question. I think it comes down to education again. I think, you don't necessarily have to be specifically an educator to be able to educate people, but you can still spread knowledge and ways to consume cannabis in like responsible ways.
I like it. Let's talk about tolerance breaks
Beautiful.
because I personally love a good tolerance break, but they generate some really strong opinions from people. People swear by them, people avoid them. You're big on tea breaks. What originally sparked your interest around tea breaks?
I guess tea breaks is always a big conversation, and I've done many a tea break myself as well. And one thing I realize about tea breaks is for me, I can find it very easy to fall back into same patterns quickly and build that tolerance back up quite quickly. And I started thinking about like, surely there's another way. And I started, instead of just completely quitting cannabis, I started reducing the amount of cannabis I was consuming per day. So if I was, say consuming 2 grams a day, I would drop that down bit by bit. And over time, I noticed that my tolerance would reduce.
One of my base tips for tea breaks is that, like you're saying, you don't have to quit altogether. Sometimes all you really need to do is if you're somebody who's been hanging out at like 30% THC,
Mm.
well, then next week, let's roll that back to like 26% THC. And then the next week, let's roll that back to like, I don't know, 22% THC. And then the next week, you roll it back a little bit more and a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, you've reset, and like 10% THC is amazing to you because you've slowly rolled back your THC. Like you're saying, your body will adjust if you slowly do it. You don't have to go cold turkey. There's nothing that says that you have to go cold turkey. Your endocannabinoid system will reset if you just roll back your THC amount, like what you're saying. If you just roll back the amounts of time that you consume, whether you're consuming 3 times a day or 10 times a day, whatever it is, you just roll back a little. And yeah, you're right, your body will reset.
Yeah, and it works. Like I use that way and it works for me. And I guess the more I started talking about it and once I released the resources around it, I had other people come to me and be like, bro, I tried that method and I greened out for the first time in years. And it's like, yeah, like it works.
Yeah, it really does work. Like, and I tell people that all the time. And like you, people are like, "Oh, that's never gonna work. That's never gonna work." And then they'll come back and they'll be like, "Wow, wow, no, like, yeah, yeah, it does. It works really well." And you're like, "Yeah, because your system will reset. You just have to have faith that it'll reset."
Yep, for sure. And
Um,
tracking during that time is also very important. Like, I guess not tracking, but like journaling or observing. I like the word observing, like observing your patterns, observing why you're consuming at that time. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be very rigidly done. It can just be like a daily kind of check-in. But once you've done that, you can look at your patterns and be like, oh, okay, I notice that I do this around this time every day. Why is that?
um, one of the things people talk about a lot when they're doing tea breaks is sleep disruption and like wicked dreams coming back and like things like that. Do you have any tips for people when they're going through that? Because my tip is very simple. And I mean, not everybody can do it, but my tip is just go out and do something physical. Like go do some physical activity, burn some calories, go get physical, whatever it is, go for a run, go for a hike. It doesn't matter. Go do something physical, get your heart rate up, burn some calories, break a sweat. And so that way, when it does come time for you to go to bed, you actually are physically exhausted. So
Mm.
you're not fighting yourself as much in the process of going to sleep. Because I find for me personally, I don't have wicked dreams when I go on my tea break, I get stuck in my own thoughts before I go to bed, and I can't shut them off because I'm like, I got to do this, I got to do that, and what about this? And it just keeps going. And so what I do is, like I said, I go out, and however long my tea break is going to be, I make sure that I do a lot of physical activity during that time. So that way, when it does come time for bedtime, I'm just so exhausted physically that mentally it doesn't matter. I'm done. I'm out.
Yep, that is a very important one, definitely. I think another one is like that ties into that is like diet and what you're putting into your body. And I love my tea. So that is definitely something that I will lean to if I can't sleep. Maybe like some nice chamomile or bit of lavender. So it's still terpenes, but just from a different plant.
Yeah, man, I'm big on my evening tea. My husband makes fun of me sometimes. I have tea and cheese every night before I go to bed.
Beautiful. That's great.
Yeah, man, it's delicious.
Nice.
I guess another thing that some people aren't prepared for when we're talking about tea breaks is sometimes you get, I'm going to call it emotional. Shorter fuse, maybe.
And that's where things like exercise and diet is really important because that plays a big part in how you experience emotions and how you're able to regulate those emotions with your body.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be gentle on yourself when you're doing a tolerance break, right? Sometimes you got to take that big breath and be like, okay, yeah. It's a tolerance break. It's okay. I'll get through this. We'll get through this. We'll all be okay on the other side.
Yeah, I think also doing things that you love doing as well. Like for me, I make music and art and those kind of things. So if I'm, on a tolerance break, I'll just delve deep into that. And I guess focus all my energy, or not all of my energy, but focus my energy into the things that I really love. Because I think that, if you're doing the things that you love doing and you're putting good things into your body and you're exercising, that can do a lot of magic.
Yeah, man. I totally agree with that. Do you think cannabis can be consumed consciously when used daily?
Yeah, I think people can consume cannabis consciously daily. Like everybody consumes cannabis for different reasons. I think it just really comes down to knowing why you're consuming, having intentions behind why you consume, and I just have that general awareness around your patterns. I think it can be easy to fall into automatic patterns of consumption, like just picking up or just consuming because why not? Um, but with more, I guess, awareness and intention, it gets easier.
What are some signs that might suggest somebody's consuming like automatically rather than mindfully?
I guess sometimes you can just like not think before you consume. And I definitely fall victim to that sometimes. Like literally last night, I was rolling myself a joint and I picked up a lighter and walked outside with the roach in my mouth, and I hadn't even rolled the joint yet. So I was like, hang on, Daniel, do you actually need this right now? Or are you just doing this because it's just there and accessible?
I'm bad for I'm a wake and baker in the sense that I make my morning coffee and I have my morning bowl. And sometimes I
Beautiful
do
combination.
yeah, like but sometimes I do it without even thinking about it. It's just what I do in the morning. I just get up, I make my coffee, and I have my morning bowl. But every now and then, especially when I'm getting ready to come up on a tea break or I know I'm going to take one, I stop myself and I'm like, am I having this morning dosing cap because I genuinely need it, something is off, something needs adjusting, or am I having this morning dosing cap because, girl, you love sitting on the balcony watching the sunrise with the birds and it tastes delicious with your morning coffee, and there is no better way to start your day. It's a fine line sometimes, it really is. How would a patient identify whether cannabis is helping or hindering their goals? I use goals very loosely because that could mean goals as far as their therapeutic outcomes, their goals as far as, having the courage to get the hell out of the house that day, to go do laundry, whatever it is. That's why I say I use goals very loosely.
Yeah. Well, like, I guess if people aren't, getting out of the house and they're not doing those things that they, I guess, figured were goals for themselves, then it's worth looking at whether cannabis is helping or hindering that situation. Um, and if it's a patient, it's definitely worth talking to your doctor and having a conversation around, what's working for you or if there's any adjustments that need to be made. And also looking at like what cannabinoids you're consuming. Like, are you just consuming THC or do you consume CBD and other cannabinoids as well with that THC?
Everyone should be looking at adding minor cannabinoids in, right?
Definitely.
Beyond CBD. There are so many more products now coming out on the market that have got CBG in it and CBN in it. There's now products that have got THCV in it. It's I don't really like it's a brave new world, but it really is. I think
Mm.
it's why at the beginning when we were asking that oh my gosh, Sam and Anthony, his roommate, were asking, what should we be asking more? What should we be questioning more? Questioning that whole, do you need the THC? Can you get it from a minor cannabinoid instead?
Yeah, for sure. The minor cannabinoids are amazing, and I think they're definitely underestimated by a lot of people with how helpful they can be for different things. Like, I only just recently started consuming CBG because none of my previous doctors recommended it, and I never really, I guess, asked about it. But it's been honestly amazing, especially for my symptoms and for what I consume cannabis for. Um, yeah, CBG and I even CBG and CBD together just feels like a powerful combination.
Yeah, man. It's not on the market anymore, but we used to have an amazing product here in Australia that was CBG Keef. And I
Oh,
loved it because it
that
was
would have been good.
like, it was very buttery, like the taste was very
Mm,
buttery. And so I used to make little, I call them Keef sandwiches. So I would
nice.
take a very fruity cultivar and I would put the keef, basically I put some bud and then some keef and then some bud and then I'd have it in the vaporizer and it would almost taste like a fruity pastry. And so to me, I
That sounds
convinced
good.
myself, yeah. So to me, I convinced myself that like it was this like decadent treat that I was doing, but in
Yeah.
actuality, I was consuming less cannabis because I needed space in that dosing cap for the keef. And man, it was so good. But yeah, it's not on the market anymore. Wah,
That's a
wah.
shame. That is a
It
big
is.
shame.
It is. But there are some CBG flowers now. And for whatever reason, flower, it's really weird. CBG flower has got a very earthy, umami kind of
Oh
flavor to
yeah.
it. Yeah, whereas the keef, like I said, was buttery goodness. It's weird. But there are definitely some CBG flowers on the market. So just grab some of those and start mixing them in with your regular flowers, your favorite flowers that you have now. But you highlighted something in your comment with you only just recently brought it in. You never had a doctor that discussed it. It's why I feel like cannabis education is so
Hmm.
important. It's so
Definitely.
important.
Yeah, like education for consumers and, anyone that consumes cannabis, but education for doctors and prescribers themselves as well, because yeah, there's always more to learn.
There is.
Yeah.
What gives you hope right now, Daniel?
I think general attitudes towards cannabis are shifting. Um, I'm definitely noticing more positive conversations um, in public and in private situations with people that don't consume cannabis that are coming around to the idea of its medicinal value. And I think, having those conversations and people educating more definitely plays a big part of that. So I'm very hopeful that over time that is just going to improve and get better, and we're all going to be able to have compassion and kindness for each other.
We can help, can't we?
Yeah.
If someone changed just one thing about their cannabis use after listening to this episode, what would make the biggest difference?
If there was anything to take away from listening to this, I think it would just be like, be aware around why you're consuming cannabis, how you're consuming cannabis, but also have compassion and kindness for yourself. Be easy on yourself, be nice to yourself, and give your body the love and respect that it deserves.
Oh, that's beautiful, Daniel. I love it. Before I totally let you go, where can people find your work and how can they connect with you?
So people can find my work at letsbudvocate.org or Let's Budvocate on Instagram.
Yeah, man, I'll make sure those are in the show notes. Do you have any projects coming up that we should be keeping our eye on? Does that sheepish grin say you do, but you don't want to say anything? I love it.
You'll just have to follow along and find out. There's a lot in the works, and I'm really looking forward to sharing everything soon.
I love it. The sheepish grin. Yeah, something's going on behind the scenes. Well, Daniel, I cannot wait to see what's coming next. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure having you today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was really fun. And yeah, those questions were great. Really got me thinking. And yeah, thank you. I love everything that you do, and it's a great podcast. So I'm glad to finally be able to be on here and have a chat.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the AusCannaPodcast. What I really enjoyed about this conversation with Daniel was that it shifted the focus away from cannabis itself and onto our relationship with the plant. We spend so much time talking about cultivars, cannabinoids, terpene profiles, and THC percentages, but we don't always stop to ask ourselves why we're consuming in the first place. Whether it's taking a tolerance break, introducing minor cannabinoids, or simply pausing long enough to check in with ourselves, I think the biggest takeaway from today's conversation is that conscious cannabis consumption isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. Awareness of our habits, awareness of our intentions, and having enough compassion for ourselves to make changes when we need to. If there's one thing I hope you take away from today's episode, it's this. Be curious about your cannabis use, not critical of it. Awareness and self-compassion can go a long way towards building a healthier relationship with the plant. As always, if this episode resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review or share it with a friend, family member, healthcare professional, or a fellow cannabis consumer who could benefit from hearing it. You can also support the show directly at buymeacoffee.com/AusCannaPodcast. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, be teachable, because you'll learn nothing from life if you think you're right all the time.